Okay, we'll get started. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the September meeting of the Brooklyn Solid Waste Advisory Board. Thank you, as ever, for joining us for this important work, and welcome back, everyone, from their summer break. As you probably know, we didn't meet in August, so this is the first time we're all back in the same virtual room since July. So a big thank you again. We've got a pretty packed agenda for tonight and quite a good turnout, I can see, so we'll get cracking in just a moment. One thing I'll do first of all is I'll post the agenda link in the chat. So I'll do that now for people to see, and then also I'll ask, given that we don't have the time to go around the room for everybody to introduce themselves, if people can just put in the chat their name, preferred pronouns, if you like, where you're coming from and what brings you to the meeting, then that way we can get a feel for everybody who is in the room. So there's the agenda, and I'll leave you all to do that as we crack on. So first up, Vandra has an announcement she'd like to make, which we're moving to the top of the agenda, given that she has to leave potentially before it would come to her usual slot. So take it away, Vandra.
Thanks very much, Oliver. So just wearing my hat from the Brooklyn Society for Ethical Culture, we've taken out a block of tickets to the event that's being hosted at the New York Society for Ethical Culture next Monday evening. It's called Up to Us 2020, and it's an event to kick off Climate Week, New York City. There are a variety of events that are happening for that and planned for that evening, including the climate clock cab, which is going to be outside the building at 6:30 next Monday evening. So if you would all like to come, you can come through Brooklyn Ethical or just go straight to the New York Society. And I'm just going to post the information on at the chat now, and then it's an open invitation to you all to come. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Vandra. Did you want to put your email address in the chat as well, in case people want to contact you directly about it?
Yes, it's right there.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, then. So without further ado, then we'll move, as we usually do, to our guest speaker. And this month we're delighted to welcome Elizabeth Balkan, who is the Director for North America of ReLoop. ReLoop is an international non-profit that works with a variety of stakeholders to develop policy positions and recommendations on everything related to the circular economy and sustainable resource management, if you like. Does that sound about right, Elizabeth?
Yeah, couldn't have said it better.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, Elizabeth's going to talk to us, I believe, about deposit return schemes and more generally. So I'll hand over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Oliver, and thank you to the Brooklyn SWAB for having me today. I was filled with memories of my first ever presentation before a Solid Waste Advisory Board, which was many years ago when I worked at the Department of Sanitation. Actually, this was even before I started working at DSNY when I was at the mayor's office. It was Brendan Sexton who invited me. It was in Manhattan, and I was absolutely petrified. But obviously, over the years, I've come to know this community as not only an extremely dedicated and passionate group, but a really fun and friendly bunch of folks who are just looking for new ideas and good dialogue. So let me just share my screen. I'm never quite as good as I should be at this after more than 2 years. Is everybody seeing the front slide?
Looks good.
Okay, terrific. Great. So as Oliver said, I'm part of ReLoop. We are an international organization, and in the US, we are a 501c3. We're working with government and NGOs, especially environmental NGOs, and we do work with industry to try to form and advance a common vision of what a circular economy looks like. And the founding principle is really one that is committed to the use of government intervention and policy to catalyze the kind of transition that we need. So voluntary initiatives are really incredibly important, but ultimately our process is based on the expectation that without policy, we won't get the changes we really need. In North America, we're focused heavily on deposit return systems, as you'll hear me talk about today. But we also work on the full umbrella of extended producer responsibility policy, as well as recycled content mandates, reuse and refill policy, and the overall improvement of data. And here, meaning not only the reporting of data and the transparency around how that data is reported, but how the methodology used in things like the recycling rate. And we can get a little bit into that if it's of interest. So I'm going to share with you some of the key findings of our current initiative. It's a 3-year program that we call Reimagining the Bottle Bill. And I expect that most folks in this group will have some understanding of bottle bills, not only because we're in New York City, part of New York State, which is a bottle bill state, but obviously your know-how. But I'm going to try to just level set and kind of present information regardless of kind of where your knowledge level's at. So this program was initiated because we find ReLoop is an organization, because we act globally and have a presence internationally all over the world, we're able to look at systems all over the world. And this is really something from my time in city government was very valuable to understand and compare, look at best practice everywhere. And so when you look at deposit return systems or bottle bills elsewhere in the world, you see that they're dramatically outperforming the bottle bills that we have in the US, with some exceptions. But in the Northeast in particular, we don't see any bottle bills that are really achieving the kind of performance that we should see based on experiences in much of Europe and in Australia and elsewhere. And I'll get into kind of what we mean by performance and high performing systems. So with that, we felt that this is an incredible opportunity, given that these Northeast states, there are 10 states in the US that have bottle bills. 5 of them are clustered in the Northeast. And so the fact that these are already existing systems and the laws are on the books, those were very hard fought battles over 40 years ago in some cases. In New York, the bottle bill was first introduced 40 years ago, and that was an incredibly difficult fight with the brands, the beverage brands and other opponents. So it's a great opportunity to align the systems in the Northeast with high performing systems elsewhere. And yet there's been very little traction at getting much needed improvements in the Northeast systems. There have been marginal improvements, and Connecticut is kind of a key example. They've just raised the deposit level last year, but so we started asking why is it that these bottle bills seem so hard to perform? There's obviously different stakeholder positions out there, which we could talk about. But what we found is that even amongst the stakeholders, there was really a difference in terminology and definitions that people were using to kind of address the issues in these systems. Obviously, there's lacking data and other methodological or operational challenges. And yet we find that there are areas where these disparate stakeholders do agree. We all want to see recycling rates go up. Brands have obligations to increase their recycled content, sometimes legal obligations, otherwise corporate commitments. So they need the material. And we know that, as I'll talk about in a bit, the material is not there in the volume or in the quality, the supply and the quality that is needed. So the critical ground is really the starting point for this program. And so what we're trying to do, and we're not quite midway through, but we are roughly in the middle stage of this program, is to provide a pathway to achieve modernization reform throughout the Northeast, both primarily at a state level, but there are absolutely opportunities to harmonize some of these reforms at a regional level and coordinate with infrastructure and other build out to make this be more of a regionally impactful intervention. But also in doing so, we're creating a template which we hope can be adopted across the United States. So for states that do not have deposit return systems or bottle bills, we hope that some of this work that we're doing will lead the way to introduction of new bottle bills, potentially even pave the way for a national bottle bill, which if anyone's interested, we can definitely talk a little bit about that in the question and answer period. So what we're doing and what we've done in the first phase of this program is really define, earlier I talked about high performing systems. We've set up a set of principles. And again, this is not a biased view, really. What ReLoop is sort of founded on is using data, using evidence, using science to anchor all our policy recommendations. And we're doing constant analysis and constant new research to inform and bolster our perspective. And so when we analyze systems all over the world, especially those that are returning 95%, sometimes 97 or 98% of the containers. So that's basically effectively a 98% recycling rate on aluminum, glass, and plastic containers. We looked at what it is about those systems that were common to those high performing systems. And so by and large, what we see across these high performing systems, meaning ones that are not only very inclusive of all the different beverage containers, but these are systems that are also very easy to use, very equitable in terms of the consumer experience. These are also systems that are very heavily and exclusively industry financed. So we see this as a 100% producer responsibility mechanism. In fact, DRS, modern DRS, is an EPR tool. But also that there'd be fair pay for service providers, and we could talk certainly more about that. New York City is a marketplace that is heavily reliant upon the work of canners, and the informal sector and other service providers are often overlooked or underpaid. So we'd see that making sure that service providers are paid fairly is really critical in high performing systems and equitable systems. And that there also be a mechanism for supporting municipal recycling programs. So while some might say that if you introduce or enhance or modernize a bottle bill, it will hollow out an existing recycling program. In fact, what we see in countries and other jurisdictions that have these optimized deposit return systems, that they exist side by side with a very robust, high performing municipal recycling program. So we can get into a little bit of that as well. And finally, but absolutely not least of all, good bottle bill systems are well managed and very well regulated, meaning there's oversight, there are checks and balances, there's accountability on the producers and on all of the players that are involved in the operations of the system, and in the money collection and in the material trading. And again, we could unpack this, but EPR right now is also a battlefield in terms of this discussion between how involved should the producer be. And what we see when we look at EPR and deposit return systems as a type of EPR in Europe and many other places is that the level of control that the producers have is much less of an indicator as to the outcomes or performance of that system than the oversight is. And so let's unpack that. What I mean is, yes, it's an important question. How much control, how much involvement, operational and financial, will the producers play? But that single factor is not the biggest driver. In fact, the biggest single driver in terms of accountability and system integrity, as we sometimes call it, is actually the level of government oversight. And it doesn't have to be government oversight, it can be a third party. But nevertheless, the systems as they exist now in the Northeast and in many places in the US that have bottle bills have very little oversight. So we could talk a little bit about what that means. So what we did is we took these principles, and I know there's a lot here, but what we did is we tried to model what a optimized system would deliver in terms of impacts, in terms of benefits across all of these 10 principles. So really trying to help demonstrate that reform is not simply about punishing producers or stealing material away from haulers, but really this is a way to optimize the recycling system as a whole and make sure that beverage containers are able to, that the highest and best use of beverage containers is facilitated. So in March, we launched our major report. As I said, we did this impact study where we took these, all of these principles and modeled and generated a lot of metrics, which for those of you who are wonks like me, I encourage you to check out the report. There's an appendix filled with lots and lots of metrics, but I'm going to try to go through them, not all of them right now, just so there's a little bit less to digest. And before I get to the impact study results, I also encourage you just to check out the microsite. It's called bottlebillreimagined.org. There you can find the full report, fact sheets for each of the states, other topical fact sheets on refillables and on things like fraud mitigation, issues that come up time and time again with different stakeholders, and several other materials. So the high level takeaways, and we'll drill down. But the thing, if you remember nothing else about what deposit return system reform across the Northeast can deliver, the bottom line is that it really, our proposal does align not just the environmental opportunity, but also this very dramatic industry and supply chain need to get the material and to get the material at a low cost. So you know that where there are, obviously inflation is at a historic high. The cost, so you're kind of constantly seeing stories in the news about beer manufacturers can't get enough glass to produce beer bottles, and PET is there's a shortage on PET. And the interesting thing about that is, of course, you also see stories that are talking about how terrible glass recycling is in this country and how much PET is ending up in our waterways. So what gives, right? Why is there this kind of perception that there's not enough supply and that there's an oversupply at the same time? And what we see with a deposit return system is that it helps meet, match the supply to the demand. And the result of that is just an astonishing amount of additional beverage containers that are actually being recycled. This means that of all the recycled content commitments that have been made by the aluminum, PET, and glass manufacturers, the three trade associations have all made public commitments to increase recycled content. And if the Northeast bottle bills were optimized, over a third of the national recycled content that is supplied, that is in demand, that is needed, would be satisfied. So in the Northeast, that would satisfy a third of national recycled content. And that the system doesn't have to be super costly. This is critical because California just passed a reform measure. And, we could talk about that. There's been some really important changes made, namely the inclusion of wine and spirits in California's bottle bill, which is a tremendous victory and a very hard fought one. But also the system is going to become very costly, much more costly. So what we're trying to show in our analysis, or what the findings of our analysis prove out, is that when you align the system with the principles, you get these major environmental benefits, you get the industry benefits, and the system has major stability in terms of the operational costs. So these things can really exist in harmony. And I'm going to kind of try to speed up through the rest of these, but there's a lot here, and I want to leave ample time for questions and answers. I decided to kind of focus on New York. Of course, we could talk about the region as a whole. We could talk about other states. I figured New York would be the most interesting for this audience. And so one of the things that we did in New York is obviously we included many more containers in the system. It doesn't make sense for any of you who've actually been able to find a place to return your beverage containers in New York City, or who tried to do so. You may have had the experience that like half of the things you feed into the RVM get spat out. It just doesn't make sense. It's very demotivating. So we need to get more beverage types into the system. And that's kind of one of the main drivers of our analysis. And as I said, for each of these principles, we get at least one output, sometimes multiple indicators, and you can find them all in our report. But still, the findings are dramatic. The recycling rate goes up from 69%. This is the state, this is overall across the state. I should say this is not New York City, to 92%. That's huge. We see 5.4 billion additional beverage containers being recycled, again, in New York State. So nothing to sneeze at. The equivalent of 72,000 cars off the road annually in terms of carbon savings, up to a 34% reduction in litter overall. This is in our roadways and in waterways. And then, of course, what this means, the system that increases the deposit and has so much more material flowing through the system means you're going to have more jobs, clearly, more economic opportunity and activity, which we call gross, what we don't call, is defined by gross value added. It's like a local GDP indicator. And that these states that are introducing the reforms will have this additional revenue, since there will always be a portion of the containers that are unredeemed. So there is the revenue stream, and that money can be used for reinvestment in municipal recycling infrastructure and capital upgrades to, again, make sure that we're not leaving any MRFs or other assets stranded. We're trying to make the system as a whole better off. And then, yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about momentarily about the impact on the municipal savings. So taking a closer look at New York City, I figured that I wasn't going to leave this meeting without getting some questions on New York City. And it's really important to look at that data. Every year, more than 3.2 billion aluminum, plastic, and glass beverage containers are wasted in New York City alone. So we do a good job. Let's give New York City some credit, because we are definitely maybe not as good as San Francisco, but have a very strong recycling program. And yet, for every one beverage container that's delivered to Sims, our city's MRF, 4 more are buried, burned, or littered, right? And that would be 10 if you include commercial waste. So again, this is not an indictment on the city or even necessarily on city residents, but we know that so many of those containers, even the ones that are part of the existing bottle bill, are in black bags. And once they're in black bags, they will never have a chance to, very unlikely have a chance to be redeemed or to end up at Sims or to be recycled. So those are really the low-hanging fruit. And this costs the city more than $100 million a year to manage these unredeemed and excluded beverage containers. So it's not negligible, right? It's a small percentage of the overall waste stream. But with glass especially, it's a very heavy and still very costly part of the city's overall sanitation budget. And in that, you contrast with the modernized high-performing bottle bill in New York State, which would recycle 90 out of every 100 beverage containers at a cost of nothing to taxpayers, while saving the city up to $270 million over 4 years. So finally, I just provide a little bit for those of you who are really in the know and are aware that the National Waste and Recyclers Association, NWRA, conducted a study. They hired RRS to do a study at the same time almost as our study came out. So I'm going to do some comparison. Besides the fact that we both suffer from a pretty underwhelming selection of stock images out there. What should you, if you're familiar with this study, sort of what are the main takeaways in light of what I just shared with you about our report? So I'm very encouraged that there is really a lot of common ground, even though this report was instigated by an industry that has traditionally been very opposed to bottle bills and resistant to bottle bill reform. We see that between our report and their report, we agree that an expanded deposit return system would lead to increased recycling, that we agree municipalities would see cost savings, and that we agree that support for municipal recycling must be part of transition. So again, I'm very encouraged by this common ground. It's part of the reason that we started this initiative. We will be working in the fall and especially in the spring on multi-stakeholder roundtables and other dialogue with key stakeholders to really kind of work through what transition should look like and how to make it an equitable process for everyone. We also have some workshops and things, more materials that we're working on that spell out the essential requirements that basically we have these principles. So we hear from legislators, okay, now what? How do I put this into law? Do you guys have model legislation? How do we get this reform put into a bill? And so that is essentially what the essential requirement spells out. It's all the things that you have to have in order to get a deposit return system to meet the principles. And I won't go into much detail on that, but just to say that we'll be working on materials that really provides a lot of technical guidance as to the standards that are in place elsewhere, what we've learned from them, what are the key aspects that have to be followed. And above all, this is really not like a la carte approach. You kind of have to do these things in a holistic way if you want to see the intended outcomes. And then we've also got some work going. We're temporarily calling it Follow the Bottle. So we do a little focus group. You could tell me how you think about this, but what we're going to do is look at across the Northeast in all of the states, both with and without bottle bills, where is material going right now? And that means if there's a bottle bill, we'll understand the material flow and process, map the whole process for DRS system material, but then also look at MRF material and really try to understand kind of the capacity and limitations of municipal recycling programs for beverage containers. How can we make them stronger for all materials, but especially for non-beverage containers as we seek to expand the bottle bill, and just understand too where there's existing industrial capacity that can be utilized to make sure that expansion to these programs is feasible. In other words, it's not going to overwhelm the system, that just the additional flow of material can be withstood. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can go into question and answer.
Great. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. That was a lot of information and clearly a lot of work condensed into a relatively short time. So thank you for squeezing it all in. So we've got around 15 minutes or so for Q&A. There's been a couple of questions in the chat. What I'll say to people is that they can feel free to type questions into the chat and we'll kind of go through them sequentially. Or also if you'd like to ask out loud, then use the raise hand function and you'll come to the top of my view and I'll be able to call upon you and we can work our way through the questions that way. So I'll start off with, Kendall had a question regarding recycled PET, so plastic, so rPET. What do you know what percentage goes back to packaging and containers versus going to other uses?
Yeah, great question, Kendall. As always, this is a huge topic right now in Europe. I won't bore you with all of what's going on there, except to say They're revising the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive in the EU. That's kind of the overarching mandate for packaging material management, as Oliver so eloquently put it before. There is a huge uproar because the beverage companies and other companies that are seeking to use more rPET in their packaging are saying, basically accusing all of the textile producers, H&M and the others, of free riding off of Europe's circular economy, right? So the idea is that the European Union has put in place some very good mandates that require deposit return system and effective collection of high quality rPET. And then the textile guys are kind of just, haven't figured out their own recycling. I mean, fair enough, textile recycling is massively complicated, but they're saying, well, this is not fair because the idea is this would be a circular system and you're just taking all the good rPET to use in textiles and then marketing it. There's a lot of strong marketing / greenwashing about how valuable textiles with rPET are. So there is a lot of controversy, and this is fueling some major revisions that are underway. They will likely include some additional restrictions on the use of rPET that is collected through either MRF style municipal recycling program or through the deposit return system. And so that could very well have an impact on things that happen here. I definitely have seen increased awareness on that issue here. But the reality is, the long-winded answer to say, in part, why this problem has arisen is because the deposit return system is so effective as a mechanism to collect high quality, valuable commodities. And yes, they need to work out kind of where those materials go. I have seen data. It is private proprietary data that I am not allowed to share, and that's partly why we're conducting our own study to get our own data and put it out there. But I have seen proprietary data from the operational side of deposit return systems in the Northeast, and even as lackluster as they may be in terms of not reaching their full potential, they are collecting so much more of the rPET than the municipal recycling systems are. So, and you can see this in our report too. I don't have the numbers offhand, but it's something like, 27%, versus 60%. So and then in terms of where it goes after collection, there is a much higher incidence of what we call closed loop recycling for the rPET that's collected via DRS. So even in systems like in New York City, where the city or SIMS manages to collect quite a bit of PET, that PET is not being turned. There's really very little that's going bottle to bottle. And there's several reasons for that, but one of them is that typically bottle to bottle recycling requires food grade material, and usually the PET that ends up in a municipal system is contaminated. You throw in your water bottle, but you might throw in your detergent as well, or a solvent that you're using in your home. And so all of this degrades, the material in a way that means that it is very unlikely to be purchased by an rPET. It's a manufacturer that is producing rPET bottles. I hope that answers your question, Kendall, but please feel free to, okay.
Thank you very much. Kendall did have another question that was technically second. I'm going to bump it to third, just in the interests of giving another voice before we crack on. So next up was a question from Vasil asking what data sets Freeloop uses.
Yeah, great question as well. And again, you could find a lot of information on our methodology, our assumptions. All of that is pretty surgically described in the report, but we base a lot of our analysis of beverage containers, like when I throw out the numbers 5.4 billion, 9.2 billion, We purchased a proprietary data set of global sales data of beverage containers. It's why we're able to we put out a report called What We Waste that looks at the incidence of wastage, which we define as burning, burying, or littering of beverage containers versus using them in a closed loop recycled capacity. So we looked at, this data allows us to we looked at 93 countries and looked at kind of the countries that have deposit return systems, the countries that have refillables, who's doing the best job, who's wasting the least amount of these containers. And so it's that data set that is the basis for a lot of the analysis on, it allows us to kind of know what percentage of the market is PET versus glass versus aluminum, the different beverage types. We know exactly, how much is sports drinks, how much is wine, how much is beer. And then the model itself, so that's the data, but the model was built by our consultant, which is Eunomia. And they have their own model, which looks at things like the system cost. And again, that's all based on their field research. So it's kind of a comprehensive, there's several different data sets that are kind of coming together, and then the modeling is able to be done. But if that doesn't, I'm happy to share my email. If that doesn't explain things adequately, please feel free to give me an email.
Great. Thank you very much. We'll go back to Kendall's second question. Kendall, did you have a comment as well? You looked like you were preparing to speak when I cut you off earlier, so sorry about that.
No, but thanks, Oliver. Elizabeth, the same question about glass. Bottle-to-bottle glass, is obviously well established, and you need clean material to do that. But there are a lot of alternative uses for recovered glass, whether it's separated colored or mixed colored or whatever else. Just curious if you have a perspective. Is the same battle happening there over competition material, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. And let me just say before I get into glass, I neglected to answer. I think probably what the last question was getting at was, do we use, what are the figures in terms of like New York City? When I reference those numbers, we are in every case, both in New York City and across all the 5 states that we analyzed, we're using public data. I mean, publicly reported data. So for example, recycling rate data, redemption rate data, these are all either reported at the, typically reported at the state level by like DEC. So again, just want to clarify that we're not like making these numbers up. But to get into glass, I think the simplest answer, both from a environmental, economic, and operational perspective, is we need to be moving glass into refillables. If you look at just the greenhouse gas implications alone, single-use glass is the most carbon intensive. And again, that's kind of a little bit of a head scratcher, but glass furnaces have to get really hot to make glass. It is a wonderful material. I use it as much as I can because it is an inert material and one that's very easy to sterilize. But as a single-use packaging material, it is pretty lousy, which is why for many decades, refillable glass was the norm. That's how people got their milk, and in many parts of the world, that's how they still get a lot of their beverages. So, again, and I don't mean to, skirt around the question, because I think, yeah, there's been some obviously promising developments with pozzolan. I'd much rather see glass be used in pozzolan than I would have it be used as landfill cover. But frankly speaking, pozzolan shouldn't be, what we're aiming for, nor should single-use beer bottles, right? And that's really the reality is we have to make refillables work for glass. In fact, it's already working in many parts of the world. So we know we've got the technology, and that consumers can adapt to that system. So that's what I'd say for glass.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Right, we only have a few minutes left, and we have a few more really interesting questions. So we'll crack on with them, and please try and I guess maybe try and answer as concisely as possible, if that's doable. It's such an yeah, again, it's one of those topics that we could have just dedicated the whole meeting to, but unfortunately we can't. So right, the next question was from Paul Burke, asking whether it's inefficient that aluminum cans can't be crushed before returning them.
Sorry, I don't think I understand. I don't understand the question.
Paul, did you want to unmute yourself?
I
Sorry,
think
Ryan,
I mean, it's about not crushing the cans before you redeem them. I think he's talking about.
Oh, I see.
And that's about, you can answer that, Ron.
No, go ahead, Ron.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say, as I understand it, it's because they need to make sure that the code is present. Well, you could explain it better than I can, more technically.
Yeah, no, it's sorry, I didn't understand quite what was being asked, but yeah, if you're using a technological, like a reverse vending machine to redeem the container, that the barcode needs to be read by the machine. I mean, I will say that most RVMs are outfitted with a compactor, so the material does get compacted. In fact, yeah, once it's collected, it's compacted and then it's transported with in a much more kind of material dense way than you know, the recyclables collected by sanitation trucks. But yeah, it does need to be, its integrity has to be preserved when it's being redeemed through an RVM.
That's both reassuring and informative. Thank you. The next question is from Ryan, and I'm really glad he's asked it, because I was going to ask it myself if not. So thanks, Ryan. Does Reloop have data on the proportion of material in high performing DRS that's collected by informal recyclers versus the average consumer?
Yeah, I mean, the short end, yeah, I think Ryan and I have chatted a bit about the need for this kind of data in New York and actually lots of places. The short answer is that they're really in high performing systems. And again, some of this is because they're high performing systems, and some of it is because of the local culture and habits of, you know, Europeans. They are the lion's share of containers in high performing systems like in Europe are redeemed by customers. And that's because the system is easy to use. There are instances of like in public, you'll see in parks where they'll have like these little rim that goes around the trash can, so that if you're in a park, instead of putting your container in the trash can, if you can't be bothered to go to the supermarket and redeem it, you can at least put it in this like kind of cozy, so that you know, the informal sector can claim it. But it's just not as common. But we are looking a lot at South America, and there's a pilot going on right now in, I want to say Uruguay, maybe Bolivia. Actually, you probably would know. So I guess two-part answer: we don't have a lot of data, but mostly that's because the informal sector is really does not play the kind of role that they play in the system here. Again, because the system is easy to use, so customers are motivated to get their 10 cents back.
Great, thank you. But I mean, just to add to that briefly, in your projections for what revamping the bottle bill would achieve in terms of recycling rates or redemption rates for those containers, where are you projecting that step change in redemption is going to come from? Are you projecting it as coming from average customers, or more curbside recycling, or from the informal sector, or how are you breaking it down?
That's a great question too. I mean, I think, and speaking super candidly, we don't have a set position on, like, we're not saying we want, you know, 80 or 85% of containers to be consumer redeemed. I mean, we want the system to work well for consumers. That is very clear. But I suspect that even a 10-cent deposit in New York City, even if redemption was easier for New Yorkers, would still not be enough to motivate a lot of New Yorkers. In other words, I think New Yorkers are happy to forego their deposit, especially if they know that that money is being used to support low-income people who are on the fringe. So, you know, New York City is going to be an anomaly. We fully expect that, as it almost always is whenever you're talking about different waste scenarios. And, you know, we want the experience to be better for New Yorkers, but we also want there to be a much more defined and, you know, space for canners, and that to be built into the regulation, so that they have, you know, access to material and equitable working conditions.
Great, thank you very much. Right, last question before we have to call it quits. And a note just to say thank you to people for explaining about Pozlan in the chat, for those who weren't familiar with what it actually is. But the last question is, if today's current deposit of 10 cents was inflation adjusted, what should or might it be? Do you have an idea of that?
Yeah, I mean, again, we look at like the deposit level. We look at like comparing the return rates against the deposit level, right? We can do this by adjusting for currency exchange rates and things like that. And by and large, we see that 10 cents is the minimum, right? Like you just, once you start dipping below, you just don't get the kind of return rate that you need. So for example, some places it's like, I think in Australia, it's like 15 Aussie cents, right? Which maybe it's higher than 10 cents, but not by much. So we're not advocating for it to be like 25, 30 cents, although there are places that have deposits that are that high. There are also places that have variable deposit levels, right? So if it's like wine and spirits, it might be more. If it's a 2-liter container, it's going to be more than a 12-ounce soda can. But yeah, and again, maybe I just don't have a really good answer for you, but I think we start with 10 and you build the legislation in such a way that there is regular review, either, well, actually both a ongoing and routine review of the deposit level to readjust it as needed according to inflation, and that there be triggers. So if the redemption rate, if there's a target for a 90% redemption rate and that target drops, say to 85 or 80%, well, then that triggers an automatic increase in the deposit level. In other words, you kind of know that there are different factors that are driving redemption, and the key one is deposit level. So it is a balancing act because it is an equity issue, and you don't want people to be paying, you know, if they get a 24-pack of beers, you don't want them to be having to pay $5 or $6 on top of that. But at the same time, you don't really need to. Really, 10 cents is totally fitting given the fact that in over 40 years, the deposit level has not increased in New York from 5 cents.
Great, thank you so much. I think we'll have to move on to the rest of our meeting. But yeah, please join me in saying a huge thank you to Elizabeth for joining us and for a very informative presentation.
Thank you.
So you're welcome. You're obviously very welcome to stick around for the rest of the meeting, Elizabeth, if you'd like to. But we always say this to our guest speakers. We're also not offended if you slope off at this point while we discuss our various things. If you're happy, Elizabeth, for anyone to follow up with you or with the organization more generally, then please drop any contact details or anything relevant in the chat. And also, if you're happy to share the presentation with us, then please send it to me afterwards, and I can circulate it appropriately.
Okay, will do. Thanks, Oliver. Thanks,
Awesome.
Everyone. I'm going to turn off my video, but stay participating silently.
Brilliant. Great. Yeah, a big thank you again. That was great. Okay, so moving on then. we're running slightly behind time, but it's okay because there's a bit of wriggle room at the end in the agenda. So next up, we're going to pass over to Lacey Torber from Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso's office, specifically his legislative director, who's going to give an update on the goings on in the office and a new program or initiative, I suppose you'd call it. So hi Lacey, thanks as ever for joining us, and take it away.
Hello. Very happy to be here with you all as usual. And actually, I think maybe we should start having the conversation about bringing the group back to Borough Hall at some point. I think that would be nice. So Oliver and I can connect about that separately. But as he mentioned, I wanted to, I'm going to share my screen because I wanted to take this opportunity to give you all a quick sneak preview, and I will keep it very short, of a new initiative that our office is working on. Can you all see the PowerPoint or the PDF? Okay. This is one that we put together for the borough board. So I'm going to skip through it quickly. And I will just sort of say, this is not exactly about solid waste, but I will say it is solid waste adjacent. And the reason I wanted you all to see it, actually two reasons. One, I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of social determinants of health in this process. And I do think that the way that we deal with our waste is definitely one of those. And so I'm going to look to you all for some guidance about things we might look at as part of this process. But then also we want to do pretty robust community engagement around this once we really get it up and going. And I know that many of you are involved with organizations around the borough, very active in your communities, and could maybe help us get the word out when the time comes. So this is just a very brief sneak preview of what's going on. And I hope I can come back in future meetings and give you a little bit more detail once we have them. So you may be aware that the Borough President Reynoso, has been an advocate for a while of changing the way that we do planning for land use in New York City. And so this initiative is really our effort to put our money where our mouth is, so to speak, and try to do something that's a little different. You probably all know that, public health was actually sort of the impetus behind modern planning. Zoning exists, I think, originally to keep noxious uses away from where people live, at a very basic level. And public health has obviously become such a huge priority after the pandemic. So we're really using the lens of public health to sort of reframe the conversation about how planning happens. I won't spend too much time on this, but I think, it also just historically over the last, 8+ years, I think communities have not really had context for why certain decisions are made about where development takes place, for example, or where capital money goes, or, what's the big picture. And so we're really trying to say comprehensive planning is the way to deal with that. Oh no, I can't move the thing. Am I frozen?
We can see your cursor moving.
I'm trying to move it to the next page. Let me see. Okay, here we go. So that's basically what I just said. And again, a lot of different things are social determinants of health, affordable housing being a big one, education, employment, transportation, access to affordable housing. All of these things are really have nexus in both public health and our land use decisions. And, the borough president has a formal role in the land use decision-making process. And so we really want to use we really want this to be as data-driven as possible. So we can really center these indicators and look at how our decisions about projects that come to our office for comment and approval can improve public health outcomes for Brooklynites. Okay, so what is that? So we have started a data gathering process with the Regional Plan Association and the New York Academy of Medicine. So this is just a little like small view into some of the things we've been looking at. And when you look at these maps, you will definitely see that a lot of very obvious patterns begin to emerge. This, for example, is a map of COVID deaths in the borough. And you can really see that, you know, if you know the borough well enough, you can tell by looking at this map that it's very clear that Black and Latino populations have been hit the hardest by the pandemic, and the data bears that out. And also, maternal health is a big priority for the BP, so that's something we're looking at too. Although it is very hard to get data aggregated about this. But it is another thing that affects Black birthing people more than their white counterparts. Tree density is one of those things. And let's see what else. This is really a big list of the types of things we're going to be looking at across the borough and comparing them, comparing and contrasting. And we're going to have maps for all of these different things: built form, infrastructure, environment, resiliency, demographics, economics, who lives where, how much do they pay for housing, what's their cost burden, are they food secure, life expectancy, all these different kinds of health outcomes. We're really looking at all of this. So here's another little preview. We've got poverty and race, race and ethnicity in the borough. Again, you see some of those patterns and how they're borne out. Inequalities in public health outcomes over and over again, you kind of see concentrated in the same areas. Asthma rates, for example, heat stress. And then you start to look at where the development has happened. You know, since 2014, all these purple dots are new housing starts. And you can really see that there's a concentration in the northern part of the borough, and like basically barely any development has happened in the southern parts of the borough. And so this is something we're really looking at from an equity perspective: access to housing, access to affordable housing, the impacts of development, and how can we make sure that, you know, the whole borough is doing its part. Capital improvements is part of it. I won't get into this in too much detail. And then basically what we're going to do with all of this is put together an existing conditions report, which is what I hope to report back to you on soon. We're going to pull out recommendations from this and also from the transition team report, examples of policies that came out in that report that we might pull out, or abolishing parking minimums for new development, supporting the designation of Brooklyn as a cease and desist zone, which basically combats harassment from predatory real estate, and supporting manufacturing retention. Those are just examples. So we're gonna have the existing conditions. We're gonna take those out into the borough. That's where we need your help reaching folks. And then we're gonna make some final decisions, or we're gonna make recommendations that the BP can use to make his decisions on land use actions. And I think that's it, actually. I'll stop sharing if anybody has any questions. Why are the time periods for each map different? Oh, I think because of the availability of the data for different things is different. And yes, Coney Island Creek, that is, and we're looking at, so part of the reason that we want to kind of workshop this in communities is because, you know, sometimes data is great, but we also want to make sure that we're ground truthing it. For the example that the BP always uses is, you know, if you look at North Brooklyn on a map, it looks like there is a lot of green space, like in Southside Williamsburg, but really most of that green space is blacktop. And so it's not really doing the thing that green space should do. And so, you know, you only know that if you're actually out there looking at it. And that's the kind of thing that we need the feedback on.
What's blacktop, sorry?
Oh, like asphalt, like a basketball court, not like grass. So we really want your input on the kind of things we should be looking at. If there's anything, you know, related to solid waste, Equity, you know, besides the fact that, you know, Queens has universal curbside now, we don't, which we're working on. Things like that, you know, but maybe a little bit more granular. We would love your input. And I think that's it.
Great, thank you, Lacey. There are a couple of questions. I see Debbie with her hand up, so we can go to her first, perhaps.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to say I didn't see on that map or on the list food insecurity and fishing in our waterways as a public health issue. And I think that's a huge public health issue, especially how dirty and contaminated Coney Island Creek is, and people are fishing there on a regular basis. The other thing I didn't see is noise pollution as a huge issue. We have a huge issue in many neighborhoods with noise pollution and its effects on the communities and on the people living in those communities.
Thank you. I think food insecurity and noise are things we had thought of, but we had not talked about fishing. And I think that's actually really, really helpful. Thank you.
Great. Kendall also had a question about your perspective on the mayor's zoning for zero carbon proposal.
I would love to
about that?
see the details. That's my opinion.
Okay, great.
I think we have to think through how this fits in with some of these citywide text amendments that the mayor is proposing, but frankly, the details on all of those have been kind of sparse so far. So we'll be having those conversations for sure.
What's it supposed to be, the zoning for zero carbon proposal? I must admit I haven't heard of it yet.
I mean, Kendall, maybe if you want to say it, but I think the mayor has proposed 3 sets of citywide zoning text amendments. One is supposed to be about enabling affordable housing. The other is about zero carbon, and the third one I think is resiliency. Or is that the same as zero carbon? What's the third one?
Well, it's also about generally sort of eliminating barriers to achieving the city's sort of building related goals, which is electrification and retrofits for sustainability, clean energy storage and the like. So that's it. I'll try to put a link in the chat if I can.
Awesome, thank you. We had a comment from Jackie Ottman as well, about including diet and access to healthy food, and education on healthy eating as metrics for health. More broadly then, in terms of us having input into this, what's the timescale and probably the best way for us to feed into it, I guess what I would ask.
Yeah, I think in the next month or two, we should have the existing conditions report done, and I can share it out with you all so you can really delve into it if you want to, and, you know, contact me with some more specific feedback. Yeah,
did you want any more feedback?
We're also hoping,
Sorry.
I'm not going to make any promises, but we're kind of hoping, or we have a vision of making some kind of train the trainer materials, so you could like take it out to your organizations and collect some feedback and get it back to us, but we're still kind of figuring out what that looks like.
Great. So would you like any kind of formal input from us prior to the existing conditions report coming out, or would it be a case of us reviewing that and then coming to you with some suggestions after that?
I think if anybody has anything specific that you can email me now, but just know you'll be getting a lot more details pretty soon.
Awesome, great. And I can see you've shared your email in the chat, so thank you for doing that. And thanks also, Kendall, for sharing the Mayor's Zero Carbon Zoning Amendment. Great stuff. So much overlap. Was there anything else to report from the Borough President this month, Lacey, or was that the main thing?
I think that's the main thing. I'm hoping to prepare some testimony for the BP for the sanitation committee hearing on recycling on the 20th. Yeah. Great.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a short while as well. So thank you. And yeah, you and I, well, when we next meet, we can discuss potentially returning to Borough Hall. That's an exciting development. Great. Okay, well, thank you very much, Lacey. That was great, and we'll come back to you with more on that, and also wait to hear from you with the developments, the existing conditions report, and go from there. But it's all super interesting. Okay, then. Next up, we have our the updates from the coalitions that we sit on, starting with the Save Our Compost Coalition, and Shari is going to give a quick update on that.
Hello, everyone. And thank you for that, Lacey. That was great information. Yeah, the SOC Save Our Compost, we had a call last week and just spent some time talking about how it's being held up. Somehow it's being held in the in City Council, but I know they're also awaiting amendments on some of the zero waste bills. So I don't know if we've got that yet. Someone else on this call may or may not have more info than that. That was as of a week ago, I guess. We're still waiting for the amendments. I think there's going to be some call to actions coming out pretty soon. So of course we'll share that when we have it. We also spent some time talking about some potential funding for at like state level and SBS grants and things like that. So there was some time wrapped up in there. And we talked about the rollout going into Queens, as Lacey talked about, of curbside. So, and how that's going and what some folks on the ground are hearing about, you know, some confusion, some not knowing what it is, but then some are excited. So I know DSNY is doing a lot of work on outreach for that. So yeah, that's the quick update. So we'll keep you posted when we have like action. There's, I guess, about 41 out of 51 city council members have are co-sponsors of the bills, from what I understand.
Great, thank you, Shari. That's an impressive majority. Great. There's also the Reusable NYC Coalition, and it falls to me to update on that. I'll do my monthly plug for if anybody would like to take over as the Brooklyn SWAB representative for these meetings. They're once a month on a Tuesday at lunchtime, 1:30 p.m. The next one's actually tomorrow, and they typically last about half an hour, so they're not too onerous in terms of a time demand. But if anybody's particularly passionate about putting an end to single-use items and would like to sit on that in my stead, then please just drop me a line and let me know. The Reusable NYC Coalition has been for a while predominantly focusing on the Skip the Stuff bill, which is the proposed bill that would see a ban, well, a change of the way that single-use items that are distributed with takeout are delivered. So it would just see them shift from being included by default to only being included on request. So that would be single-use cutlery, napkins, and condiments. So instead of having to opt out of them or ask to not receive them, you would have to ask to receive them. And for a while, they've been working on that. You might have seen that I sent through some information not too long ago about phone banks that were being conducted, by Rain Manley, who was the speaker at our last meeting and spoke about the bill at length in conjunction with 350 Brooklyn. So I think they had their last phone bank of this current set today, this afternoon, and they're up to, I think, 25 city council co-sponsors of the Skip the Stuff bill, which means that it should be in a good position quite soon to go for a hearing potentially, which would be good. Otherwise, the meetings follow on very, very soon after our SWAB meetings. So a lot of the time the notes are kind of out of date by now. So there was talk about cafeteria culture producing an animation for the Skip the Stuff bill, and I see that is now in the world. So Rhonda, I can see you nodding frantically. I don't know if you want to say anything about it off the cuff or.
No, it's just a cute video.
Okay.
It's just so sweet.
I saw it on Instagram personally. Do you know if it's on the website? Is it on Cafeteria Culture's website, or anywhere
No,
people
we
can
just have it
access
on
it, or-
social. Yeah, we just have it
Okay.
on social.
Well, I can find a link to share it with people, share the Instagram link with people, and even if we share that in the chat, then people should be able to see it, even if they're not on Instagram or other social medias. So I'll do that shortly. And there was also the only other thing apart from the Skip the Stuff, for which work is ongoing, was about NYC monthly school plastic free lunches, with the first one being October the 12th. I don't know if there's anything more to add about that at this stage or not.
Well, we did our first one. It's cafeteria culture led, student led, and we did our first one in May, and it's more than 700 schools. It's all elementary schools with kitchens. So anything with a satellite kitchen. Some middle schools are involved, but most high schools and middle schools have a different menu. So they are not participating per se, but there's a bunch of things that students can ask their school food service providers to do, because it's an option with New York City schools. But the really exciting part is that there's going to be, so it's going to be monthly starting October 12th. And then the second monthly one is going to be Plastic Free Lunch Day USA, which is the whole US. We're going to be inviting school districts all over the country, and the Urban School Food Alliance, who now has 18 school districts as members, is going to help sort of bump this up. And they have lots of great publicity at their disposal and a lot of great networking. So we're hoping to get a lot of great initiatives. The appetite is there.
Indeed. Great stuff. Thank you. And thank you, Sarah, for both your interest in Reusable NYC and also sharing the animation. So let me know if that doesn't work. So that's it from Reusable NYC. Hopefully some positive stuff on the horizon for that. Where are we next? What's next? So committee reports, and so this will still be me and Rhonda talking. If you like, Rhonda, should I talk about the hearing first, and then we can talk about the next meeting after that? So there is a City Council Sanitation Committee hearing on the 20th of September. It's a little bit of a strange one. We were sort of initially indicated that it was going to be a private one, and now it's a public one, or rather sort of closed to public testimony versus open to public testimony, but it's actually open to testimony, and it's ostensibly on the state of NYC recycling, which is very broad, but then it also includes a bill which would look to conduct a study on the use of single-use plastic in New York and alternatives to it. So it's like a very broad focus and then a very specific thing as well. So it's a little bit strange. So in my conversations with the chairs of the other SWABs of Manhattan, the Bronx and Queens, and following on from a conversation that Manhattan SWAB had with Council Member Sandy Nurse's office, who is of course the chair of the Sanitation Committee, she had indicated a desire to hear more sort of collectively from the SWABs, and therefore give the SWABs a bit more prominence in these hearings. So I think having pivoted to being a hearing that would have public testimony, the SWABs will be submitting testimony for that, but we're going to try and create some joint testimony from all 4 SWABs in the next week, which will be fun. So there's plenty to talk about, and the aim will be basically to create it this week, and then ask it to be voted through all the various SWABs at the end of this week and by the beginning of next week, so that it can be presented at the hearing next Tuesday, which will be an in-person hearing as well for those who want to attend in person. So with that in mind, Rhonda, regarding the next legislative committee meeting, I know we'd had conversations about potentially moving the date of it because because of various scheduling conflicts. So it would be helpful for us to have at least some sort of conversation about what we want the Brooklyn SWAB's points to be before the joint testimony is drafted. But then we've also got plenty to do in the committee for the next proper meeting anyway. So where are you thinking on that?
Okay, so we are moving the date. Usually it's been the second Tuesday, and the date is now, the meeting is going to be going forward. It'll be second Thursdays from 6:30 to 7:30, but next this month it'll be the fourth Thursday, just because we want to get a little more advance notice, and also because I have a conflict. So I will send out an email with all of that involved. What we did last legislative committee meeting was we just sat together and went through the EPR, the New York State EPR legislation that's proposed, and what we had agreed. And we also had members from the Queens and the Bronx and the Manhattan SWABs. And Kendall, I just mentioned that I was going to send that email out with the scheduling information. So you'll get it right in your email box.
That's great, Rhonda. I mean, some of us, hear that once, but have a hard time making notes of when you've said that the meetings are going to be. And so seeing it now visually would be really, really helpful. Thank you.
Would you like to do that? Did you remember what I said? Because I'm talking right now.
I didn't, and you don't need to respond to the question immediately, but when you have a chance, try to put it in the chat. It would be really helpful.
Okay, we'll ensure it's put in the chat properly.
I'll get right on that. So also, the last meeting we looked at the EPR legislation, and we had agreed with all of the members who were in the Bronx, in the Manhattan and the Queens SWABs, in addition to the Brooklyn SWAB legislative committee folks. We were looking at the EPR legislation together, and we agreed that in this month's meeting, we're going to look at the bottle bill legislation. It's, will come up in January. Obviously, it's not going to pass now, but it's just a matter of wrapping our heads around it as a body of SWABs. So again, I'll send an email out with this information, and I'll get right to putting this information in the chat. And then let's see, I think that's it. That's pretty much it. Oliver, was there anything else? Do you remember?
No, not with regards, I think, to the legislative committee's next meeting and so on. I think it makes sense as well to focus on the bottle bill continuing from the previous meeting, and also our speaker tonight. And
I will send. Oh, sorry.
No, with regards to the hearing next week, we'll need to get a position together in terms of getting some points and things that we would like mentioned in the joint SWAB's testimony. I know Manhattan and Queens and the Bronx are also working to get their points together. So what I'd suggest we maybe do, because ordinarily we would have had a meeting tomorrow based on the sort of usual second Tuesday thing. But I do support moving it to the following Thursday. That's fine. But perhaps we can get an email chain and a Google document in the next 48 hours that people can contribute to in terms of their ideas of things they'd like to have included in the testimony.
Okay.
I have plenty of ideas, and I'm sure you do as well. But
yeah.
we can open it up for contributions.
Okay.
Awesome.
Also, I can send around what we talked about, because everybody had a lot of really good comments about, as we read the bill together. We just read through it together like an old-timey text study. And that's what we'll do for the bottle bill. It's much shorter, so it'll go quickly.
Great. Thank you, Rhonda. Okay, so yeah, I think that's it for Legislative Committee, isn't it? Great. So we'll move on. Next one is Outreach Committee. So that's Shari. Plenty to report on that front.
Hello. Yes, so we actually were on the second Thursday. So we had a meeting this past Thursday. So we have been working towards our next, what we call Community Board Roundtable, where we're inviting the Community Board Sanitation Committee members, if there is one or wherever that may be enveloped in all the community boards in Brooklyn, as well as any other, the chair or the manager from the community boards to get together and talk about their biggest concerns in their community, within their board. We had one at the end of June. So the next one is, we're looking at the end of October. So I need to put in the request for the borough president's time. It's likely going to be on a Thursday because we carefully evaluate all of the committee dates and times listed and try to avoid them. So that puts us towards the end of October. So we'll see when the borough president is available, because it's great when he can sort of kick us off. So we have that. And then we did talk a little bit about, wait, let me get my notes here, is schools in the Bronx are the focus of the next school compost rollout, or the next compost rollout starting in the fall. And so there's actually going to be discussion about this at the SWAB meeting on Wednesday. So we had a little bit, but we're still looking for more info. So Rhonda has the link to join that meeting. That's at 6 o'clock on Wednesday. So if you want more info on that, we didn't have a ton of information because it sort of started a lot of questions. So Rhonda, who's the woman speaking at SWAB?
Meredith McDermott. She's the head of sustainability for the DOE.
So that was, one of the things we had talked about in the past is like specific school outreach and education. So that's how we sort of got into that topic, and it led another way. So, so those were kind of our two big things. So we'll be continuing on that. Our next meeting is actually to be determined now, because we were waiting to hear when the legislative committee meeting might move. So it'll switch to Tuesdays. It's just whether or not it's the second or the third. So I'll definitely send out notes for October, but like our outreach committee for September has occurred. So we'll keep you all posted. I think that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Shari.
Yeah, and thanks, Rhonda, for posting the link.
Yeah, excited for the next community board roundtable. It should be good. Hopefully we can build on the last one. Next up is the Organics Industry Committee, and I believe, Alyssa, were you going to step in for Vandra on this one? You're on mute still.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm stepping in for Vandra. So we're looking for some co-chairs and to expand the membership of this committee. And I think we're planning to either meet the last Tuesday or possibly move it to Wednesday with all these other scheduling issues. So stay tuned and to be determined. But we definitely need some membership and somebody to step up as a co-chair. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so not a huge amount of movement from the committee while we try and get a co-chair, a new co-chair or two involved, and some new members. So I know there's a lot of interest in organics in the group. So it's a great opportunity to I guess shape the work of the committee as well moving forward, and it's open to not only Brooklyn SWAB members but also guests and anyone interested. So please drop us a line if you'd like to be involved.
Can you say a little bit more about what that committee does?
Sure. Do you want to go, Ollie, and then I can jump in?
Or yeah, I don't mind. Or you can go first if you want. I don't mind.
So basically, it's the organics industry. So we're talking about different issues in terms of carding, structure, legislation, and anything related to the organics industry. So
there's always a ton going on in the city council and the city at large about organics. So it's a specific forum to discuss organics issues within the city, and how the Brooklyn SWAB can best use its resources to try and push the conversation around organics and actions around organics in the right direction.
and we do talk about commercial, some commercial issues as well as residential, and trying to expand the programs.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Okay, thanks, Alyssa. So we'll update as soon as we have a date for the next committee meeting, and hopefully we can spread the net wider and get a few more people along. Next up is events committee. So Liz, anything to report from that at the moment, or not much?
I guess I'll be working on supporting Sherry with the outreach committee event.
Great. Yeah, there's a considerable overlap there. So that makes sense. Okay, brilliant. Then there's the NYCHA committee in association with SWAB. Who's our representative on that these days?
I think it was Susan, but I don't know if she was able to attend the last meeting, and I don't see her now. I don't know if Betty or Kendall, were you able to attend? No. Oh, that's right. Kendall, you were out. I know.
I wasn't able to attend.
Okay.
Sorry.
So we don't have, I don't think we have an update unless.
I do want to say that I attended the previous month, and there were a lot of ideas that were given that were very, I'd say, creative and outside of the box. And from my point of view, maybe not that practical. And I would love, and I know it's not our committee, it's the Manhattan Group, but I would love to see people who live in the public housing themselves to be talking about some of these ideas, because they live it, it's their life experience. And to get some very unusual creative ideas, fine, but I believe that has to be balanced with the lived experiences of the people there. That's all.
That's great. No, it's a very, very good point. Thank you, Betty.
I love that comment. I just want to say I love that comment too. I think it's very, I think it can seem really presumptuous otherwise.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say that, but I was trying to be, polite, but yeah.
I'm sorry, I wasn't.
No, I think it's great. I sometimes too quiet about things. So thank you. Yeah.
When I know that Diana, who's the co-chair, lives, I don't remember which spot, somewhere, I want to say Harlem, but I could be wrong. But I haven't been in several months, so I don't know how many other folks are members there. So are members, living in NYCHA that are also members of that committee. So, at least the co-chair and is head of one of the resident organizations, potentially focused on recycling. I don't want to misquote, but I just wanted to share that so it's not all that. No,
I mean, I know it's not our committee and we're kind of guests at it, so we can't maybe be too assertive, but I was skeptical after I wasn't at the last meeting, I was at the one before, to talk about renowned architects doing certain projects for free. I mean, that's wonderful, but that's a very big lift. And there must be things like we've seen with, what's his name? Morales, Green City team and
Demanda.
those folks, they're doing like real work on the ground with the residents. I mean, that has to be the direction that we all go in. And, you know, getting world-renowned architects to do things is great, but I think that's kind of a lift.
Okay, great. Thank you all. I don't know what the action point from that is. I guess it could be something that we feed back to the committee chairs. We'll make a note of it and proceed from there.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, so then executive committee is a couple of things to update on that. The first is, so we're going to move towards being better in terms of the approval of the minutes and actually putting the minutes in the public forum as we should be doing. So one of the things that I'd like to do is see if we can approve the meetings from the minutes from the last meeting now. I think we have 12 members in attendance. I see thumbs up from Sherry. So hopefully those of you who are members will have seen the minutes from the last meeting circulated and had a chance to take a look at them. What I'm going to ask to do now is for all those members who are in favor of approving the minutes from the last meeting, please use the raise hand function now, or a thumbs up, the thumbs up function, something visible. If we get, it would have to be basically unanimity at this stage for us to actually approve it here and now. If not, I can do a link later in the week if people haven't had a chance to read it or have anything specific that they want to raise in terms of disagreement. I've seen, you know what, thumbs up doesn't last very long, so can people use the raise hand instead, and then we'll take a count from there.
Where is the raised hand, on which screen? I'm sorry.
It's under reactions at the bottom.
It's instead of an emoji, it's like a bar, a button going across underneath.
I'm looking. Oh, okay, a thumbs up. Okay. I think I got it.
Okay, I can see. Okay, I can see 11, which is one short. With that being the case, we are then short of a. Sorry.
Did Betty, were you able to raise your hand if that's what your intention
Yeah.
was?
I was including Betty.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, with that in mind, I will. We don't quite have the numbers right now, so I'll send it round to the wider, for the members who weren't able to attend tonight, and go from there. And then the aim is then to circulate the meetings, the minutes from this meeting a bit earlier and give more people a chance to read them so that we can get them approved more promptly in future. In terms of the backlog of minutes, what we're going to do is do an exec team approval of them, as it's a bit onerous asking all the members to do them. So we're currently ploughing our way through them, the last about 12 months worth of minutes. So once we have them approved, we will let you know. So yeah, thank you everyone for that. The next thing to fill you in on was we sent out a member survey, so basically just a short survey to the Brooklyn SWAB members to kind of get some feedback on both the general operation of the Brooklyn SWAB, but also potential of areas of work and what people were interested in and felt they knew about, and so on. So I wanted to share some results from that quickly. So I'm going to just share my screen just now. and just walk through that quite quickly. Can people see that?
Yes.
You can see it. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so how do we do on responses? So we sent this out about a week and a half ago. We've had 11 respondents out of our 22 members. Four of the non-respondents are on the exec team, so it was kind of not necessarily designed to include them. And then we have 7 who have not yet responded. So these are preliminary results, and hopefully we'll get responses from everyone in due course, and we can update this. But we asked people what their main reasons for involvement in the Brooklyn SWAB were, and gave these options as well as an other option. We couldn't think of another option, and nobody else could either, but people are members of the SWAB to learn stuff, to advocate for causes that they're passionate about, a little bit for professional development, and also a lot for connection with like-minded people, and I would probably class networking amongst that as well. So yeah, education and advocacy kind of came out on top in that, which was interesting. We asked people what their main areas of interest and also what their main areas of expertise were in waste, and we came up with a bunch of categories, as well as an other category in case people wanted to put other stuff in. And it was really interesting seeing the results of that. So this looks quite complicated, so apologies if you need to kind of tilt your head and have a look at it. But basically the blue bars are how many people had an interest in that particular area, and the red bars are how many people felt that they had some expertise or knowledge in that area, and then the yellow bars are the difference between those two. So what we were trying to identify was areas that people had a lot of interest in, but perhaps not the knowledge, or areas that people had a lot of knowledge in as well. So we can see like organics, a lot of interest in that, waste prevention and reduction, a lot of interest in that, climate change and resilience, a lot of interest in that, along with some other things. But there's some interesting areas where the yellow bars are quite high, particularly like environmental quality, climate change and resilience. My bar's blocking the other one. Waste impacts on health, which I know was the subject of an event quite recently. But these are all really helpful in terms of helping us identify future topics for speakers. If it's an area that there is interest in, but not necessarily the knowledge, it's a way of getting speakers into, to inform and educate the members of the SWAB as much as the guests who attend that particular meeting. So yeah, thank you for that. In terms of people's engagement and time commitment in the SWAB, we gave options for how much time people currently gave to the SWAB, or to what extent they were involved, with the lowest one being just answering the occasional email, and the top one being like doing loads of stuff. You can see the vast majority of people said that they attend the general meetings and one or more committee meetings, which is true, but also nobody said that they do additional work, and I know that's a lie because I've seen who's responded. So I'd like to qualify that response slightly, as I think some people should be in the bottom category. On top of that, we asked how they felt about their current time commitment, and again, the majority of people are just happy with the time they put into the Brooklyn SWAB. I was pleased that nobody said that they wanted to spend less time on the Brooklyn SWAB than they currently do, which is nice. Maybe they thought it but didn't say it. But yeah, it's nice that people are generally happy, and a couple of people are up for potentially putting in more time given the right opportunity. So we'll certainly reach out and kind of work on how that could happen. These are some ideas that people had for spending more time on the Brooklyn SWAB and what they'd like to ideally do. Specific issues are something that we've talked about before. Designing initiatives and seeking funding is a really interesting one that we could look into, but it would certainly be a new area. And then more outreach. We're you know, we're always doing as much outreach as we can with the resources we have. So we'll see how we go on that one. I asked about other languages that are spoken. And so we have a couple of French speakers and one Tagalog speaker, which is great. I meant to check actually for Tagalog prevalence in New York City, but I forgot, so sorry. But clearly we need to be looking at recruiting a few more people, particularly Spanish speakers, I guess would be useful in New York City. I know with the exec team excluded from that, I know we would have like a bit of Russian with Liz, and also I can speak a bit of Spanish and French. So there's a little bit more that's not there, but certainly languages is something we could strengthen on. And then we asked for kind of general feedback on how the SWAB was managed and the committees were operating. Things that the Brooklyn SWAB could do more or less of, and then general comments. So I'll just run through some of them really quickly to end. This was some of the feedback on the Brooklyn SWAB's kind of running and how the committees are running. There was one request for more subcommittees, so we can dive into that a bit. A greater variety of meeting dates for people who have standing conflicts. More voices generally, which I certainly agree with, and a bit more transparency around commercial interests from speakers and contributors, which I think is something we can always work to improve on. Things that we could do more or less of. I won't go through all of these in detail, but quite a few calls for more kind of more outreach and education and collaboration and being an advisory board. So I guess just do more of what we're trying to do. So that's helpful. And also, yeah, it can be a driver for trying to improve. Finally, other comments, some nice ones about the SWABs being paid, I wish, and that they wish they had people that had more time to contribute. I know it's always it is always a balancing act. Obviously, the SWAB is a volunteer board, and we're extremely grateful for the time that people do put in, and certainly don't take it for granted. So a big thank you. And then in terms of moving forward, we're going to try and encourage everybody who hasn't had a chance to fill it out yet to complete it, so we can get a more complete picture. We can then pull out some action points, some ideas for speakers and topics, follow up on some specific feedback that we've received, and follow up with individual members who've put forward certain ideas or said they want to contribute more, or that they have certain skills to offer on how that can be utilized and brought in. And then I'd like to build on this by creating a broader survey for frequent guests. I know we have quite a lot of people who attend meetings and aren't formal members. So whether or not we end up bringing those guests on board as formal members, which we are always open to, but we value the contributions that our guests make as well. So we'll see how we can use their ideas and skills and resources within the SWAB and in the work we do. So thank you everyone for that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and stay tuned. I can see some stuff in the chat. Yes, so this was only something that was shared with official members. The requirements for becoming a member, Shari, you're always slightly hotter on this than I am, so perhaps I'll hand over to you.
Sure. Yes, the wait, payable to Oliver. I feel like the initiation fee should be payable to all. No, and I would love if someone who's faster than I am, like working on the same computer, to post from it's actually posted on our website, brooklynswab.org, on the I want to say about page, but you have to fill out the application. There's no application fee. It does not cost to be a member. We ask that you've completed, I want to say 3 out of the last 6 months of meetings. been attended the last 6 months of meetings. You fill out the application, we send it over to the borough president's office, they review it, and they're the ones that make the approval. We just start checking to make sure that you've completed the requirements we've requested. Thank you, Liz, for posting that, and Elisa. Then as a member, you're required to attend wait, this is where I messed up. I want to say 10 out of the 12 meetings. No, more than half in a year. Someone help me. I'm not looking at the.
No, it's more than half, I think. So it would be
more than half. So
6 of the 11.
6 of the 11 meetings throughout the year, and to participate and attend one of the committees on, so they in general have monthly meetings. So that would be the requirement. Sometimes there's work outside of those. There's definitely more work to be done that we would love, but again, you know, we're all volunteers. So we also realize people have lives too. So we try to balance everything. But yeah, if anyone has questions, you can email either the SWAB email, or I can drop my email in the chat as well, but happy to answer them. And the application is also on the page that was listed there. So yes, thank you, Lisa.
Awesome.
And then you have voting at meetings too, when we have to vote on you know, SWAB testimonies or meeting minutes, things like that. Does a committee meeting count towards the 3? Oh, interesting. The 3 out of the 6 is really designed for the general meeting, but it's 3 out of the last 6 months. So, but I think you get bonus points for being at a committee meeting because those are also public. Yes. Thanks, Afia.
Great. Thank you everyone for that. And yes, we always welcome new member applications. So please do get them in, or talk to us about getting them in if you're interested, and we'll work with you towards it. And thank you, Michael, for mentioning that we're a friendly and inclusive SWAB. We certainly try to be.
I just wanted to say that the requirement for 6 general meetings is just to give people an idea of the meetings, and like once you demonstrate that you've committed to the 6 meetings, it's also like a test of time commitment and that kind of thing. So just a little explanation why a committee meeting necessarily would not count towards that.
Indeed, yeah. Thanks, Liz. Okay, so there's a couple of things before we have a few minutes for open floor. A couple of things in the agenda under announcements that it's just worth flagging up. BK Rot over in Bushwick is holding a fundraiser on September the 30th. They don't have any info on the actual event yet, but they're asking to save the date, and they're still looking for donations as well, because they're going to hold a raffle and a silent auction as part of the fundraiser, and they're looking to source all of the prizes and items from local means. So thank you very much to those of you who already made suggestions or offers around that. I can share the link to the Facebook post about it as well in the chat just now. There's also an unofficial All SWAB social happening on Thursday, I think, from 6 to 8 p.m. on the rooftop of Berry Park, which is on the corner of Berry Street and North 14th Street in Williamsburg. So do go along to that if you're free and want to see some other SWAB folks in person. That's the Facebook post for BK Rot. And I think that's it in terms of the agenda. So we have 5 minutes left if anybody would like to raise anything or make any points. I'll put it to the floor. Sherry?
I just saw in the intros, and I see a couple of familiar names that I wanted to remind everyone that the Master Composter course is back as of March this year, and it's year round. So I actually did put this.
You muted yourself, Sherry.
I have no idea how I did that, but I'm going to put the link in the chat for the Master Composter course and all of the offerings. So and welcome anyone that wants to join. You can take one thing, you can take anything. It's free to participate. So.
Awesome, thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone else? Any more for any more? Rich?
I have, assuming you can hear me. Can you hear me? All right. General question. So you may all remember, or some of you remember Ben Cogan, who was in Brooklyn and then moved to Vermont and then started programs in Vermont to capture can carriers from 6-packs and 4-packs, and then they get collected and brought back to breweries so they can put new cans in them. We are poking at the idea of trying something like that in New York City with can carriers, and we're looking for maybe about $10,000 to get it off the ground, and that basically pays for return bins for can carriers at most places, and that probably chews up most of the budget. So I just wanted to ask if anyone is aware of grant funding or other funding that might be directed at said project. Be happy to learn about that. And also, if anyone's interested at all, just shoot me a message. I'll put my email in the chat. But it's just a side project. Ben is really the mastermind, and I'm just hoping to help him bring the reuse to New York City.
Great, thank you, Rich. So so Reusable Solutions is that do you know if that's a for-profit company or a non-profit, or do you not know?
I don't want to say for sure because I'm not certain, but I think if it's not his nonprofit, there is a nonprofit. He found a nonprofit in Vermont to run the project through, so that the funds could be granted to a nonprofit and then used to get the project going. Since it's not really going to him or me.
Sure.
Whoever buys the bins, right?
And Redish, is Redish like formally involved, or are you doing that as a side thing from Redish?
This is separate from Redish entirely. They would probably not even be happy that I was wasting time on anything else. But it's on brand for me. It's on brand. No, there is a possibility, if there is a requirement at some point for these things to be washed, that Redish could potentially price out for whoever's in charge of the product. We would provide a quote for washing. But that's not me directly. I'm the sustainability guy.
Sure. Great. Okay, thank you. I can see Michael's already jumped in with a potential grant.
Yeah, I am definitely aware of that one. Thank you, Michael. That's on the radar too. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. But yeah, if anyone else has any leads, then send them on to Rich. Thank you. Anyone else have anything they want to raise before we wrap up? Going once, going twice. Okay, great. Well, so our next meeting, oh yeah, thank you, Liz, for sharing the location of the social on Thursday. Because of the holiday weekend, our next meeting is actually going to be only in 3 weeks' time, so it's October the 3rd, I think. Yes, 3rd of October, and we're hoping, fingers crossed, that we'll have Borough President Reynoso speaking at a Brooklyn SWAB meeting for the first time in his formal capacity as Borough President. He spoke at the Community Board Roundtable, so it's not quite the first time we've had him in the Brooklyn SWAB stuff, but in the general meeting it will be. So we'll keep our fingers crossed for that one, and hope to see you all there. And so it just remains for me to thank you all again for joining us and for contributing. And we'll wrap up now, and wish you all a good evening and rest of your month, and see you when we see you. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Oliver.
Thank you.